Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Welcome to this short video where we are going to discuss on the topic of personality. So in particular, we are going to discuss from three perspectives. Okay, personality from three perspectives. First one, psychodynamic perspective. Second one, humanistic perspective. And the third one, social cognitive perspective. Okay, before we begin, let's first look at what is personality. So basically, it's a common term nowadays. Everybody are using this term personality to refer to a characteristic or any attribute of a person. So personality is basically a pattern of enduring, distinctive thoughts, emotion, and behaviors that characterize the way an individuals adapt to the world. So basically, their trend, okay, their orientation, which are relatively permanent. So this is where the enduring means. Relatively permanent refers to usually these people will always goes back and use the same style or respond to the same way. Okay, the first perspective, psychodynamic perspective. Okay, for those who are already take introduction to psychology in your foundations, so you must be very familiar with psychodynamic. Okay, it's very popular and it's very well known even outside of the psychology field. Okay, it's popular because of both, okay, good contributions and quite a number of controversies. So what we are going to learn in this psychodynamic perspective, first and foremost, we are going to discuss on Freud psychoanalytic theory. Okay, Sigmund Freud is basically the one who they regard as the forefather or the founder of psychoanalytic theory. Okay, and then we are going to look at how Sigmund Freud explain about the structures of personality. Okay, structures of personality, and then we are going to look at how psychoanalytic or psychodynamic scholars explain about defense mechanisms. And the last part, we are going to evaluate some contribution as well as criticism addressed to the psychodynamic perspective of personality. Okay, so what is psychodynamic perspective? Psychodynamic perspective is a theoretical view on personality that emphasizes so much on the unconscious, okay, unconsciousness. So what is conscious? So conscious is something that you are aware of your emotion, aware of your thinking, aware of your behavior. So unconscious is the other way around, something that you are not aware of, okay, beyond than your control sometimes. So the enduring, so this psychodynamic perspective, they focus on the enduring patterns that make up our personality, which are largely unavailable to our conscious awareness, thing that we cannot control. But it affects our personality and it affects our behavior. So this unconscious awareness, which have unconscious motive, go through unconscious process, shape our behavior in ways that we cannot consciously comprehend. Sometimes we don't even understand why we behave like that, why our personality like that. Okay, we ourselves don't understand. This is where psychodynamic perspective emphasize on unconsciousness. So this perspective focuses on unconscious motives and unconscious process, which are all, without realizing it, influence our behavior, cause us to react in certain way, cause us to feel in certain way. Okay, so the focus of psychodynamic perspective, behavior, our behavior, other people's behavior, is actually only a surface characteristic, not truly understand someone's personality. Okay, it's basically not actually the total of the whole personality of person. What we can see, what we can observe are only the surface. Okay, the ingredients, the content of personality is beside or behind the conscious awareness. Okay, in order for us to understand someone's personality, we need to go beyond of their behavior and try to analyze, try to interpret the symbolic meanings of that behavior. The real behavior that we can observe is actually not the accurate or not the real one. So the symbolic meaning of behind of that behavior and the deep, okay, inner workings inside of the unconscious mind, that is the real one. Okay, so it's very interesting, but at the same time, it's quite controversial. Okay, the importance, this perspective also emphasize on the importance of early childhood experience in adult personality. So whatever our current personality is basically a reflection and effects of what happened in our childhood. For examples, when we are growing up, okay, in our early years, okay, toddlers, okay, early childhood, we experience accidents, for example, and these accidents at that particular time is very traumatic. We are riding motorcycle with our parents, and suddenly we got an accident. Okay, a very traumatic experience. So now you can never ride motorcycle, for example. Okay, you have phobia when you ride motorcycles. You have anxiety when you have to ride motorcycles. So your current behavior, which you fear, you have excessive anxiety, fear, afraid, or phobia of riding motorcycles, is actually caused by your childhood trauma, where you had an accident. Okay, that is an example of the importance of early childhood experience in shaping adults' personality. Some other focus of Sigmund Freud from psychoanalytic theory, Freud emphasized very much and focused so much on sexual drive. Okay, sexual drive, according to Freud, was the most important motivator of all human activity, human behavior, human thinking, human feeling and emotion. So everything will goes back to their sexual drive. However, the caveat here, the condition here, Freud does not define sex as we understand it now. Freud defines sex as anything that provided organ pleasure. Okay, anything pleasurable for Freud is sex. Okay, anything pleasurable. Say for example, you really enjoy eating ice creams. I do. Okay, you really feel pleasure when you are able to enjoy your ice creams. So if this is what pleasures you, from Freud perspective, is also considered sex. So Freud thought that human sexual drive was the main determinant of personality development. And he felt that psychological disorders, dreams, and all human behavior represent conflict. Okay, represent conflict between our unconscious sexual drive and the demands of civilized human society. So Freud, based on his idea, everything that pleasure us is sex. So sex will makes us behave, makes us feel, makes us think in certain way. And this thinking, due to this sexual drive, shape or cause us to have a certain personality. And most of the time, our behavior, our psychological disorders, our neuroses, or even our dreams are basically a reflection or represent the conflict between our unconscious sexual drive and the reality and the demand of the society, and with the morality, okay, the civilized human society. Okay, so Freud also developed psychoanalysis. Okay, by the name is this, he analyzed psychological aspect of human being, psychoanalysis. So he psychoanalyzed his patient. So he analyzed the psychology, the thinking, okay, the idea of unconscious drive of his patient that suffers from physical symptoms which do not have any physical cause. Okay, if you have the opportunity to study history and philosophy of psychology, you will know in more detail whereby most of people who understand or study psychodynamic and psychoanalysis, they are basically have training in medical field. Okay, they are physicians, they are doctors. So there are cases whereby patients come and have problems, okay, have illnesses, have anxiety, okay, have disorders. So when they apply their medical skills, they scan, they look at all of the organs, there are no problems. Okay, there are no problems that can cause the person to have that illness. So basically, they cannot apply their medical knowledge to treat this patient. Okay, some patients come, have problems, but they do not know what cause. So they started to look at, they could be mental issues, okay, psychological issues, issues with the mindset. So that's why these people who are trained in medical field, they start to look into psychology as well as psychoanalysis. Some of Sigmund Freud patients, they have neurosis, abnormal behavior, okay, which are very clearly stated in your textbook hysteria. Okay, we also in Malay also we know this problem as hysteria. Suddenly someone shouting, crying, okay, and without having any cause, okay, but they have emotional disturbance during a specific times. Anxiety, okay, all of these psychological disorders, obsessive compulsive disorder, for examples, personality disorder, for examples. So Freud focus or psychoanalyze, use his techniques to try to understand neurosis, hysteria, anxiety, and disorders. In order for him to understand what are the cause of these issues, he used psychoanalysis techniques. At that time, he used hypnotic. Okay, he put people on a semi or unconscious state, but these people are open to suggestions. We always respond to the hypnotizer, okay, the therapist suggestion, or when the therapist asks them, they will answer it without realizing it. Okay, he also used dream analysis. He also used free association. He also used self-analysis. Actually, he self-analyzed his own dream. Free association is still a popular technique in current psychotherapy, whereby the client, the patient, the people who have the mental health issues or mental disorders are encouraged to talk freely without any condition. Don't have to care whether it's right or wrong. Don't have to care whether it's embarrassed or not. Just talk whatever they want to talk. So there is an example of free association. One of the techniques that Sigmund Freud used in his psychoanalysis. Sigmund Freud and his psychoanalytic theory is one of the first theory that started to explain human personality and how human develops, or how human learn, or how human shows their personality. So personality from Freud perspective, it consists of three important structures, which are id, ego, and superego. And he makes an analogy. Our personality is like an iceberg. Okay, personality is like an iceberg. They are existing important aspect of personality which are below our consciousness. Actually, it's there, but people don't realize that there is an important aspect, the sexual drive, sexual motive, that influence our behavior. Why? Because it buried in our unconscious mind. So only part or some part of our personality are we aware of it. Okay, it demonstrated in our behavior. So things that we are aware about our personality, things that we are aware about behavior, those are the part of personality which are above the sea, the part of the iceberg which people can see. Anything inside or below than the surface, we cannot see it, but they are important aspect of our personality buried or exist in the unconscious part. Okay, only a small part of it are above our consciousness, or we are aware of its existence. So again, our personality have three important structures. Some books call it as personality elements. Some books call it as personality components. But all refers to the same thing: id, ego, and superego. Okay, let's discuss this id, ego, and superego in more detail. Okay, so what is it? So Freud, when describe about sexual motive, when describe about desires and pleasure, he always refers to the id. So id is the part of our personality which are unconscious. So in our id, we have the unconscious drive, okay, an individual reservoir of sexual energy. Okay, if you refers back to this iceberg, it is at the deepest level of our unconscious mind. Okay, we don't realize it, but we basically behave or react to the demand of our id desires. So our id, part of our personality, it works based on the pleasure principles. So what is pleasure principles? Pleasure principles, if you look at young toddlers, okay, when they want to eat, they want it immediately. If you don't feed them, they will cry. Okay, so that is pleasure principles. When they want to something to pleasure themselves, okay, to eat, okay, to drink milk, to play, to sleep, if people do not fulfill their demand, their needs immediately, they will cry. Okay, so that is the basis of pleasure principles. Anything that gives them pleasure, they want them. Okay, so we can see that. So it, according to Freud, everyone will have it, but it is in our unconscious. Okay, it causes us behavior, but we don't realize it. Okay, the second structure of our personality is ego. So ego, if you refers back to the iceberg, some part of the ego we conscious, okay, we aware of it, and another part of ego is buried in our unconscious, but not as deep as the id. So ego deals with the demands of reality. Okay, this is where when people are growing up, okay, towards their teenagers, toward their early adulthood, they started to behave in accordance to the norms, okay, in accordance to the rules and regulations, in accordance to the traditions, okay, because of what? This is where they started to have a proper evaluations of reality. And our ego, it follows reality principles. Okay, in contrast to the id, which work based on pleasure principles, ego works based on reality principles. Okay, it's bring back an individual's pleasure within the norms of the society. Examples: if you see someone's eating ice cream, again the ice cream, okay, if you see someone eating ice cream, you also feel the desire. You also want to eat the ice cream, but you cannot go and steal someone else's ice cream, and you cannot go and steal ice cream for shops if you don't have enough money. Okay, so if you work based on pleasure principle, you will just go and snatch someone ice cream and you eat it yourself. Okay, that is based on pleasure principle. But in reality principles, you have to follow the rules and regulations, the norms, the traditions of your society. So in our society, it is not permissible for someone to steal ice cream. So you do not steal, instead you go and buy your own ice creams. So in our ego, it contains the higher mental functioning, okay, higher cognitive functioning, such as reasoning, problem solving, and decision making. All of these, according to Freud, part or the content or the ingredients of our ego. And ego is very important in a way. It acts as the mediator between the id, okay, that always wants everything that pleasurable, and the superego, which we are going to discuss after this. So superego, what is superego? Superego is another element, another structure of our personality, which act as the angel, okay, which acts as the moral judge, okay, the moral principles of someone. Superego contains our conscience, okay, the part of our personality which always uphold, which always want to follow moral principles. Okay, consider in our superego, It considers whether something is right or something is wrong, whether it's supposed to be done or whether it's supposed not to be done. Okay, this is the ideal part of the personality. Superego always evaluate the morality of our own behavior. Okay, however, superego, similar to it does not operate on the aspect of reality. Okay, it's always operate at the aspects of something which is moral judgment, ideal. Okay, superego also consider whether the its demand, the its desire, here is called the its impulse, can be satisfied in acceptable moral principle or not. Okay, if say for example, you don't have money to buy the ice cream, okay, you cannot steal, so you have to hold yourself from eating ice cream for the moment. Go and find jobs, okay, get money, and then buy the ice cream. So that the role of superego, to make sure you behave or you do not follow everything that it demands you to do. Okay, so that is the id, ego, and superego, the structure of personality based on psychoanalytic theory. So those are the structures of personality according to Freud's psychoanalytic theory. Another important contribution of psychoanalytic in trying to explain human personality is defense mechanisms. I think you might have heard about defense mechanism by now. So what is defense mechanism? Okay, you have to look like this. Okay, remember the id, ego, and superego. So it always demand we do something immediately. Okay, based on pleasure principles. Superego will always hold it. Okay, always check it whether it's following moral principle or not. Okay, sometimes there will be conflicts where you cannot resolve. Okay, the demands of the impulses is too much for you to entertain or fulfill. Okay, the conflicts will happen. Okay, the conflicts that erupt among the demands of the id and the superego, and the reality create a great deal of anxiety for the ego. So what happens if you cannot solve the demands of the id as well as the restriction put down by your superego? So your ego will be in dilemma. Okay, so this situation will create anxiety to you. Okay, you will feel anxious. Okay, so what happened? So your ego, okay, has strategies. Okay, have to apply strategies to deal with this anxiety caused by the fight, okay, by the conflict between the id and superego. Okay, so these strategies is what we call as defense mechanisms. So defense mechanisms are the tactics, okay, the strategy that we can use or our ego can use to reduce anxiety, to reduce our own anxiety by changing the way we think, okay, unconsciously distorting the reality of the fact about the situation. So there are actually 8 types of defense mechanism. Okay, it's important also to mention here, Freud is the person that initially explained about what that human being have defense mechanism to deal with their anxiety. However, his youngest daughter, Anna Freud, is the one who really expanded this defense mechanism theory, okay, who really details out the descriptions of all of these defense mechanisms. So according to Anna Freud, there are 8 defense mechanisms that everybody have, but when it's really uses or when it's really influence our decisions and thinking and emotions, we don't even realize it, okay, because it's in our unconscious mind. Remember, it's in our ego. Okay, so the defense mechanism, the first one is denials, second one is displacement, third one projection, fourth one rationalizations, fifth one reaction formation, sixth one regressions, seventh repression, and the last one sublimation. Okay, you notice that I've crossed 2 of the defense mechanism, which are rationalizations and regressions. Okay, things like this. If you had the opportunity to read the books by Schultz and Schultz, is explained in quite details of all of these 8 defense mechanisms. However, our textbook for Introduction to Psychology only describes 6 of these 8. Okay, that's why I crossed these 2, which means that these 2 defense mechanisms are not covered in our current textbook. Okay, let's briefly look at one by one what it means by all of these 8 defense mechanisms. The first one, denial, the one that all people always use, the one that always exists in us. Okay, easiest to use actually. Denial. So what is denial defense mechanism? Okay, when something happens, people deny the existing of an external threat or traumatic events. Examples. Okay, persons who are being diagnosed that he or she have terminal illness, cancer for example, at the early stage, they might be denying the imminent of death. Okay, the doctor says that you only have 2 more years to live. You only have 1 more year or 6 more months to live. They basically deny that actually it's going to cause them to have or pass away. So that is example of denial. They distort our reality thinking. Second, displacement, shifting id impulses, okay, the demands of our id, from a threatening or unavailable objects to an object that is available. Okay, such as replacing hostility towards one's boss with hostility towards one's child. Examples. If you are married, for example, and then you cannot express your anger. You're angry towards your husband. You cannot express your anger towards your husband. Instead of what? You express your anger towards your children. Okay? Displacement. Or the other way around. You angry towards your children, but you cannot express your anger towards your children. Instead of what? Your husband is there and you lash out to your husband. Okay, you express your anger towards your husband, but that anger originally supposed to be addressed to the children. Displacement. Projection. Okay, attributing a disturbing impulse to someone else. Okay, such as saying you do not really hate your professor, but that he or she hates you. Okay, examples. You get a low marks for the final exam. Okay, so instead of saying that actually you do not hate me, okay, because I give you low mark, but actually in reality I am the one who hate you. Okay, that's why you get low mark. Okay, projection. Okay, rationalization, reinterpreting behavior to make it more acceptable and less threatening. Okay, examples, saying the job from which you were fired was not really a good job anyway. Okay, you take introduction to psychology and suddenly you get a low mark, and then you say that never mind, the course is not important anyway, so I don't care, it's not going to affect you whether you pass or you got an A, you got your B or got an C. It's not going to affect anything, okay, because the course is not important. Rationalization. Okay, next, reaction formation, expressing an id impulse that is the opposite of the one that is driving the person. Okay, expressing id impulse, okay, id demands, id desires, that is the opposite of the one that is driving the person. Examples, someone disturbed. Okay, someone disturbed by urges to own an iPhone. Okay, he who are unable to own an iPhone may become a hater of Apple products. Okay, the iPhone 14, for example, are so expensive. You actually really want to buy or to own iPhone 14s, but because it's too expensive, so what happens? You only can afford Huawei. Okay, not to disrespect any Huawei product. So instead of saying that I'm unable to buy iPhones, so I have to buy Huawei. So what happened? Basically, you say that actually Apple is not good. Huawei is better. Okay, reaction formation. Next, 6, regression. Okay, retreating to an earlier, less frustrating period of life and displaying the childish and dependent behaviors characteristic of that more secure time. Examples. Okay, most of you are actually excellent students in your primary school. Most of you are excellent and best students in your secondary schools. Okay, but when you join higher educations, you join universities, you started to score below average or less than others. Okay, your score for your subjects is not as excellent as it used to be. Okay, it's not the best student of your batch. You are not in the top 10, for example. So instead of mingling about your anxiety, your frustration about your CGPAs, your mark and everything, you goes back to your secondary school era. Okay, why? At that time, it's not a frustrated period of life. That is the time that you are on top of the world, best student in your school. Example, okay, regression. Repression, denying the existence of something that causes anxiety, such as involuntarily removing from consciousness some memory or perceptions that being discomfort. Okay, so repression is quite risky to have. Okay, so basically, say for example, you had been sexually abused before. Okay, victims of sexual abuse. So it's very traumatic experience. Okay, it's very stressful and sad experience. So you don't want to think about it. Okay, you don't want, because when you think about it, it will cause you to feel sad. Okay, it will take away your happiness, your enjoyment. So what happened? You want to forget this thing. You want to remove from your awareness that this has happened. So basically, you buried this traumatic experience deep inside your unconscious mind. Okay, basically, you want to forget that it's actually happened. And the last one, sublimation. Okay, sublimation, altering or displaying its impulses by diverting instinctual energy into socially acceptable behaviors. Okay, alter or replace the id impulse by diverting usually the negative energy into a more positive energy, socially acceptable behaviors, such as diverting sexual energy into artistically creative behaviors. I give example that is simpler for us to understand. When some couples, some marriage couple had a divorce, or some love couples break up, okay, being dumped by their boyfriend, for example, dumped by their girlfriends. So what happened? You feel angry, frustration, disappointment, sadness. All of these are negative energy, negative emotion. But instead of go and express your anger, cry, okay, lash out your emotions to someone else or to even your couple, okay, your ex, you take that disappointment, that sadness, that frustration, and turn it into motivation. Okay, because some ex couple, okay, they have strong motivations to improve themselves. So they improve their physical appearance, they improve their career achievement, okay, their academics achievement, so that in the future, if they somehow or happens to meet their ex, they will make the ex feels that it's basically you are at the loss when you left me. Why? Because now I am better person, to make the person jealous, okay, to make the person feel regret that he or she have dumped you. Now people desire, people want you, but you are on top of your world. Okay, so you want to make people jealous of your new self, new achievement. So you change all of those negative emotion into something motivational, okay, something inspirational. So makes you change that it impulse into something positive. Okay, those are two of the most significant contribution of psychoanalytic theory in the explanations of personality and personality development. Beside those two, Freud also explained how we develops our personality, okay, through which stages. So Freud believed people go through universal stages of personality development. Each stage involves sexual pleasures in one part of the body more than the others. Okay, for example, Freud explained that in the first 18 months after birth, people or toddlers go through oral stage. And then after that, 18 to 36 months, babies goes through anal stage. Okay, from 3 to 6 years, people go to phallic stage. And from 6 years to puberty, people grow to latency periods. Okay, so next, after that, in adolescence and adulthood, people go to personality developments what Freud regard as genital stage, when they swift or they shift their sexual pleasure to outside of the context of family. Okay, so this is another contributions of Freud psychoanalytic theory to the developments of one's personality. Okay, what you need to understand as well, Freud, even though he is considered as the father or the founder of psychoanalytic theory, there are people who agree and disagree with him. And in fact, during that time, a lot of people criticize Freud perspective. So if you have the chance to read other books, you will find or you will come across the term as Neo-Freudian. Okay, Neo-Freudian refers to scholars, figures, psychologists who come after Freud, who are influenced by Freud theories of personality and other theories of neurosis. Okay, they have been influenced positively and negatively. Positively means that they continue the works of Freud, okay, in explaining about unconscious and unconscious mind, the sexual drive and everything. But there are also people who we regard as Neo-Freudians, Neo-Freudian scholars who actually disagree with Freud, but they develop concepts in opposite or which is to counter what Freud has established earlier on. Okay, here in the next in this section, we are going to look at psychodynamic critics and revisionists, people who basically disagree and who may have extend some of Freud concept. Okay, Freud critics stress on the following points. First, sexuality, according to them, is not as pervasive a force as what Freud believed. Okay, it's not as important of what Freud believed. And the Oedipus complex is not universal. Okay, Oedipus complex is one of a more controversial concept that Freud introduced, whereby children will have sexual desires towards their opposite gender parents. For example, daughter will have sexual desires towards father, son will have sexual desires towards mother. Okay, so it's quite controversial in this sense. So experience, which according to Freud, are very important, especially childhood experience, very important aspect of personality development. Experience later than the first 5 years deserve attention as well. Why? Because most of the time when Freud talk about childhood experience, he is referring to the first 4 or 5 years of their life. And the ego and conscious process play a more dominant role than what Freud believed. Okay, remember, Freud talked that it will always demand, okay, it will always have impulses, which ego as well as superego have to counter, ego will have to tolerate, okay, will have to decide which one to follow. So Freud give very big emphasis on the it, while the critics, people who come after Freud, the Neo-Freudians, say that actually the other two, ego and superego, also important. Okay, and socio-cultural factors are also important in personality development. Why? Freud always talk about psychosexual factors. Okay, remember the stages, oral stage, anal stage and everything. And according to Neo-Freudians scholars, for them, beside the psychosexual factors, socio-cultural factors also important. Okay, so one of the Neo-Freudian scholars was Karen Horney. Okay, Karen Horney is one of the first psychodynamic scholars who focus on socio-cultural approach. Okay, according to Horney, hypothesis must be supported with observable data. Okay, remember when we talk about psychoanalysis technique, okay, his technique, for examples, hypnotic, okay, free association, dream analysis, and most of those sexual conflicts that people have are buried in their unconscious mind, okay, unconscious drive, unconscious motive. All of these are unobservable. Okay, Horney is one of the first few who really emphasize that we must also look at what we can see, okay, observable data. Socio-cultural influence should be considered, okay, not only about psychosexual factors, but also include socio-cultural influence. Okay, how the cultural context, the learning experience, family interactions, friends, neighborhoods, environments influence one's personality development. The need for security rather than sex is the prime motivator. Okay, Horney basically go against Freud, whereby she stressed that actually psychosexual factor is not the most important factor. What in fact the need to feel secure in the environment is a prime motivator to behave in a certain way, hence will affect one's personality development. Okay, beside Karen Horney, Carl Jung's also one of the famous psychodynamic, and he quite famous when he extended, okay, the unconscious aspect or concept that was once introduced by Sigmund Freud. And Carl Jung does not name his theory as psychoanalytic or even psychodynamic. So Carl Jung introduced his own theory, which is called as analytical theory. However, one of the concepts under this analytical theory is Carl Jung expanded the concepts of unconscious. Okay, for Carl Jung, within our unconscious mind, we have one type of unconscious, which is collective unconscious. Okay, what is in collective unconscious? The impersonal, deepest layer of unconscious mind. Okay, and these collective unconscious are shared by all human beings. Why? Because these collective unconscious have information which are common among our ancestors. Okay, common among our ancestors already have this behavioral pattern. Okay, under or inside our collective unconscious, we have archetypes. Okay, what is archetypes? Archetypes are emotionally laden ideas and images that have rich and symbolic meaning for all people. Okay, so we have conscious and we have unconscious. Okay, so there we have it in our unconscious. But Freud never explained that within the unconscious, we have one type of information that we have, which are collective unconscious. And this information, we don't realize it, but actually we inherit this behavioral pattern, this symbolic meaning, these images from our ancestors. We don't even realize it. And one type of information that we store in our collective unconscious, the name is archetype. Okay, emotionally laden ideas and images. And one of, not one, here 1, 2, 3. 3 of archetypes that we have in our collective unconscious are anima, animus, and persona. Some books explain in more detail. Okay, anima is basically a behavioral pattern, okay, a feminine behavioral pattern inherited by male, okay, which without realizing it, some males, okay, some adult males, okay, teenage males will have feminine behavioral style. Okay, so they have the characteristic of feminine. They are very tidy, they are really looking after their looks like a girl, but they are male. So they don't realize that they have that archetype ingrained in their collective unconscious. Same goes to women. They are females, teenagers, girls, women who have behavioral pattern like a man, masculine. Okay, they are aggressive. They are very masculine. Okay, they really like adventures, for example. So those are characteristic of behavior of male that are inherited by female, masculine. And most of the time in our collective unconscious, all of us have persona. Okay, so what is persona? Persona is public mask. Okay, remember Freud say that what we can observe of someone is not the real of themselves. It's basically is the real things about themselves, but their personality is they don't show it in public. Okay, so same goes to persona. Persona here, when people go out in public, they wear a mask, a public mask. If you want to know the real self of the person, ask his roommate, ask her housemate, ask husband, ask siblings. Okay, there people will know the real person's personality and behavior. So these are some concepts explained or extended by Jung in his analytical theory, okay, after Sigmund Freud. Another scholars, psychologists, which are being influenced or under the school of thought of psychoanalytic and psychodynamic is Alfred Adler. Okay, and he introduced the theory of individual psychology. So individual psychology emphasizes on people. Okay, people are motivated by purposes and goals. Okay, very positive, not about neurosis, not about unconscious. So for Adler's, perfection is not pleasure. Okay, if we want to achieve the highest levels of human being, the perfection is basically that is key motivator, key drives of a person to behave in certain way, hence have a personality. Okay, Alfred Adler also explained about compensation. Okay, the concept of compensation is normal attempt to overcome imagine or real inferiorities. Okay, Adler explained this in this sense. Everyone would have the sense of inferiority, okay, when they have anxiety. Okay, for example, not all of us are given athletic ability, good in sport, for example. Okay, these are important aspects when we are growing up. Okay, so here, people who or children who are weak in terms of athletic ability, they are not good in sports. Okay, so they will develop inferiority. So how they want to overcome inferiority? So they need to compensate that by excel in other field. For example, you might be not a good athlete, okay, not good in sport, but you can work hard and improve yourself and excels in academics. So that is an example of compensation. So when you are able to achieve to excel in academics, so you compensate the feelings of inferiority that you have because of the sport. Okay, so that is compensation. So each person also has natural impulse toward warm relationship, which Adler called as social contacts. Okay, warm relationships. So, and Adler also one of the first people to explain that actually people have different personality based on their birth order. Okay, birth order can influence a person's success. Okay, I'm not saying that is correct, but most of these perspectives have been found is not being supported. Some are supported, but most are not supported. Okay, so those three are neo-Freudian scholars who some extended, okay, some go against Sigmund Freud. So what is important for us is to evaluate psychodynamic perspective of personality development. Like I mentioned, some people agree, some people criticize. Okay, people who are agree with Freud, we can see some similarities between of their concept. Okay, they share some principles. For example, personality is determined both by current experiences and by early life experiences. It's no longer about childhood experience, it's also about the present experience. Both give influence or have effects on one's personality development. Personality can be better understood by examining it developmentally, okay, as a series of stages that unfold with the individual's physical, cognitive, and socio-emotional developments, not focusing cross-sectionally, especially during childhood only. Okay, especially not during the first 4, 5, or 6 years of children life. Okay, when they go or grow up to become adolescents, teenagers, it also affect their personality. When they become adults, it also affect their personality. Not only about childhood. This is what the shared principles. And we, as a human being, we are mentally transform our experiences. Okay, we give them meaning. We give our experience meaning, and this meaning actually shape our personality. Okay, continue. Shared principles. The mind is not all about consciousness. Okay, unconscious motive lie behind some of our puzzling behavior. Usually, abnormal neurotic behavior. Okay, the individual's inner world, okay, unconscious, often conflicts with outer demands of reality, okay, which have caused anxiety in ourselves. And this anxiety is basically not easy or difficult to resolve. Anxiety that are created or the effects of conflicts between the inner mind, our inner world, and the outer reality. And the sixth one, personality and adjustment are important topics of psychological inquiry. Why? Prior to Sigmund Freud focus on personality and neurosis, all of other school of thought, structuralism, functionalism, behaviorism, they are not looking at personality the way Freud does. Instead, they are looking at experiments, looking at consciousness, okay, looking at elements of consciousness. So when Freud come with a new paradigm, looking into the importance of personality and unconscious drive in order for him to understand about neurosis or problematic behavior. Okay, beside all of those shared principles between Freud and his Neurodian followers, okay, Neo-Freudian scholars, so there are also criticism addressed towards psychoanalytic theory. Okay, one of it is Freud overemphasis on early family experiences without acknowledging that people can change and adapt. There are people who experience childhood trauma, who go through a very traumatic childhood experience, but they don't turn out to be neurotic, or they don't turn out to be someone who have psychological disorders. In fact, someone's turned out to be a good person's public figures. Okay, so he don't pay attention to that. He overly rely on traumatic childhood experience. And Freud too much emphasize on unconscious mind abilities to control behavior. So basically, we as a human being, we cannot reason our own behavior. So based on Freud, so he's been criticized on that. And he also paid too much attention on psychosexual factors, which is the sexuality. And lastly, because of his methods of free association, dream analysis, hypnotism, it's very difficult for other researchers, psychologists, or even psychodynamics scholars as well to replicate his study in other contexts. So it's very difficult to validate what he has found in his research or in his clinical observation. Okay, so those are some criticism and some shared principles between Freud and Neo-Freudian scholars.